Hey everybody, John Navigator here. Good evening, greetings. Alright, we are somewhere near... Oh boy. I don't know. Can't remember the name of this place. But I just stopped at the donut shop over here and got me some donut and coffee. I've got a long drive ahead of me tonight. My goal is to make it to at least Philadelphia, West Virginia. But what I would really like to do is make it all the way to Zanesville, Ohio. By the way, if you haven't noticed, my boss caught up with me today, and well, guess what? I am now on Qualcomm E-Log. I am the first one to use the E-Log on the fleet. He has made me a guinea pig. He volunteered me, so be honest with you, I still don't know how to use it. I guess it's better to try it now than later, I suppose. I've got a lot of learning to do on it yet. Well, this is going to be a very long video. I suspect it's going to be a long, boring video. I will try my best to entertain you guys. One of the reasons I am doing this is I need your company. I need you guys to help me stay awake. Come on, baby blue. Let's go, baby blue. So we're gonna play a little game tonight. It's gonna be called It's So Random. Whatever pops up in my mind. Oh boy, that's a scary thought. I must warn you guys. Alright, the first thing that popped up in my mind was, or is, hold on, let me set the cruise control here. As many of you know, my dad was a merchant marine, a sailor, but a civilian sailor. I know a lot of people get kind of confused when you say sailor. They automatically think of a Navy sailor. Well, a merchant marine is somebody in shipping and big ships like containers, and well, they didn't have ship containers back then, but he started as a deckhand and worked his way up to the chief engineer. He was very good with the diesel engines. So anyway, he did that for many years. Now that's just the background of the story. When I was about, I don't know, 9, 10 years old, my dad saw this lifeboat of a really big ship. I don't know, about 300 miles away from where we lived in the island. So he went and salvaged this lifeboat, and I think he had like 10 people with him. And so anyway, they went and salvaged this thing, filled it up, well, not filled it up, but they loaded it with lots and lots of steel plates and rebars, and mostly steel, a lot of steel materials. And believe it or not, he put a 16 horsepower Kohler engine on this gigantic thing. Can you imagine a big ship and then you put a Toyota engine in it? That's what the ratio was. But you got to remember, my dad was a great sailor with many experience on the high seas. So everything went well until they finally got into the middle of the ocean, and wouldn't you know it, bad weather came upon them, and they were being tossed all over the place. And make matters worse, his crew were a bunch of nobodies, and they were just, local people. They didn't know anything about engines and boats and all that kind of stuff. And what made it worse was my dad converted this gasoline engine into a kerosene engine. And as you know, kerosene is, it has a lower compression ratio, which basically it will prematurely ignite, and it's not as powerful as gasoline. In fact, you can't start the engine by just using gasoline. So what he did is he had 2 tanks. The first one was a gasoline, and then when he starts it, he uses the gasoline to start it, and then once the engine is warm, then he'll use a valve and switch it to kerosene. Now you can't use full power with it, and I think what he did is he either he doubled or tripled the head gaskets. He put 2 or 3 gaskets on it to lessen the compression. So anyway, there they are with this big major storm, and everybody's in a panic mode. It reminds me of the story of the Bible where Jesus Christ was asleep and everybody else was in panic, like, wake up, master, we're gonna die. So the rest of the gang was they were wearing their goggles or flippers. They were ready to jump off ship. They were ready to swim. And my dad just said, just follow my direction, just head this way, that way, do this, do that. And believe it or not, they made it. You should have seen one particular guy. I remember his nickname was his name was Alfredo, though we called him Torpedo. Well, my dad did. My dad had a nickname for everybody that worked for him. So Torpedo, he wasn't originally from the island. He was from somewhere. And as a young child, he was the right. I don't think you could call him the right hand man because he was still a teenager. He grew up in a rebel camp. In the Philippines, we call him the NPA, New People's Army. And he grew up with some kind of a sidekick to the commander. I think his name was Commander de la Ramas. So anyway, when de la Ramas got killed, he decided he had enough. And so somehow he ended up in the island at the age of 15, 16. And Torpedo was, oh man, he had a great sense of humor. He could make a dead person laugh. And one thing he was good about was he was great on a guitar. He was a self-taught guitarist, and whenever there's a function in our barrio, whether it be just a social drinking, a party, a wedding, whatever the occasion was that required music, there he was in the middle playing the guitar. And the funny thing is, in the island you can't buy the strings in the island, so you would have to go to the big city to buy it, and sometimes they don't even have it. So Torpedo would be playing this guitar with missing strings, or sometimes he would put just a piece of nylon in there and he would make it work. It'd be like, what, 2 or 3 strings, and then the rest of them are made out of nylon. But Torpedo has played the guitar for governors, mayors, and just about anybody. Boy, he could play that thing. And when I was a little boy, man, I don't know. See, most of the people that work for us, well, everybody that worked for us was in the barrio, but most of the people that, well, a lot of them, lived with us in the bunkhouse. And I remember many, many times where I would sleep in the bunkhouse with the rest of these guys. I remember Torpedo. One thing I hated about him is he would always tickle me, and I would laugh so hard, and I would pee in my pants. Oh man, he was a great guy. But he had a downside to it. He could drink. He could outdrink just about everybody. And most especially what we call tuba, which is coconut wine, fermented coconut wine. And if you Google this or put it on YouTube, it's TUBA, or just put down coconut wine in the Philippines. You'll see what I mean. And coconut wine is kind of like apple cider. It will take a lot for you to get drunk out of it. And chances are, if you're not used to it, you'll end up having a diarrhea. One time though, there was an old junk payloader tire that was discarded in our property. So what did Torpedo do? Well, he cut out a piece of this tire, and he made sandals out of it. Each pair weighed about, I don't know, 10 pounds possibly, and it was about 4 inches thick. At about, I don't know, a mile of walking, you're done tired. Your legs, it feels like it's gonna fall off. I wonder where that thing is. I don't know if that thing, I would imagine it would still be around. If it hasn't been lost, you could never wear that thing out, man. Later on, when I was in high school, I kind of moved to the big city in Mindanao, and I became a city boy. So I would like kind of imagine a college student going to college, and in an off season, goes home for a couple days or a couple weeks, and then goes back to the city. And so that was my life for a while. And I remember every time I go home, he would always have something he wanted me to buy in the city and bring home. unfortunately though, when back in 1980, 79, at the end of 79, my mom and my dad separated. And what was a very lively home with full of lights, so many people in our house. My dad was kind of building a resort, but by then, at the end of it, they got separated, and just out of the blue, the whole thing became dark. And we were the only one in that part of the island that had electricity and running water. And my dad even put electricity in our barrio. And so back at the end of 79, my dad and I and my brother, my sister, him, what then became my stepmother, and his son migrated here in the US, leaving my mom and everybody else back home. Just broke, just no income whatsoever. And the sad part was, or the good part was, most of the guys, well, not most, yeah, most of the guys had to leave because there was no more income. But I think about 3 or 5 people just ended up living in our house with my mom, and they took good care of each other. They lived off the land, and whatever my mom had, everybody had it. Whatever they had, they shared it with my mom. And I remember when I lived here in 1979 to about 1983. Then I came home. But then 1983 to 1990, I lived in the Philippines, but I mostly lived in the city because I was studying high school. But 1990 up to the present, I've been living here in the United States. But from 90 until about 98, maybe, I was living here, but I would go on vacation in the Philippines every couple months or every other year. I remember when every time I'd go home, I would bring everything I own as far as shoes, clothes, whatever. Packed it all up, brought it home, and then it was always a tradition where before I leave the Philippines or the island to come back here, everything I own, it would stay at my house back in the island, and people from the barrio would just pick out the ones that they want. And I remember one time, when I come back, when I go to the Philippines, I would have boxes and boxes of my stuff, and then on the way back, The only thing I carried with me was a backpack and the clothes on my back. That was it. The rest that was distributed to just about everybody. And one of the things I've always done was the day that I leave the island to come back here, it's always been a very, very sad day. Oh, I hated that feeling. I hated the feeling of leaving everybody behind, coming back here. But that was the reality of, you know. But I will always, the day that I would leave, I would always go swimming at the sea, in the ocean, because I knew that was that was going to be my last swim until a year or 2 years later. So anyway, I would go swimming with my shorts and underwear. So I'd go swimming with that. And I remember Torpedo would always say, "You can't bring your wet clothes with you, so give it up, give it up." He would literally just wait until I got undressed, and whatever I took off, that was his. They had no other income to buy clothes or shoes or sandals or slippers or one of those fancy leather sandals. For a long, long time, I could see my clothes just all over the barrio. I mean, it's like everybody had, everybody had one piece of my clothes, be it a shirt, a pants, underwear, whatever I had. And I could always tell it was mine because I've always worn white shirt, and that's it. I rarely wore something that was colored or and so people in the barrio, they would all, they would sometimes by random meet up one another, and they would have white shirts. Even to the darkest days of my mom, Torpedo was always there, helping out my mom. Well, unfortunately, he died. I don't know how old he was. He was probably at least mid-40s. See, one thing you guys gotta understand, back home in the island or in the Philippines, most people don't go to a doctor for a regular checkup. People just either die of heart attacks or cholesterol so high the doctors can't believe it. Diabetes, and sad, but that's just the way it is. So many people that ended up in our house, either they grew up at the house. One particular guy, I think his name was Mario. He was just a teenager, and he lived in our house, and it was free food, free room, lodging. That's what the deal was. He didn't. My mom didn't pay him, but he had a place to stay. So anyway, Mario had this big crush with this girl, Lori, I think her name. Yeah, Lori. And Mario is one of those guys that just can't express their emotions to a girl. They just have the hardest time speaking to girls. They're so shy. You know what Mario did? Instead of telling the girl, how he felt, he attempted to commit suicide. He drank some kind of a poison from our bodega, and my mom asked him, I said, what the stupid thing did you do this for? And so he told my mom that he was in love with Lori, and so what did my mom do? Drag Lori to the house. On his deathbed, Mario told Lori why and how he felt, and well, miraculously, Mario survived. A week later, they got married. Oh man, that was... Talk about young kids, either high school or, mostly high school, or grade school actually, or both. People were so poor that they would take their children. It's a tradition in the Philippines where if you can't really afford to send your kids to school, then the parents would give that child to somebody who can afford to send that child to school. It's kind of like then the child's that kid's responsibility would be cleaning up the house, doing laundry, cooking, mostly cleaning. I think we call them working students. Oh, we had a whole bunch of kids like that in our house. I tell you, it's the closest thing that I could think of is back in the 1800s, where a big old ranch had, hired hands. I bet you we had about 50 people at our house at one given time. One in particular person was a girl named Marlin. She was about, I don't know, 3 years older than I was. And she was the daughter of the payloader operator that worked for the highway construction. They worked for the government, but then my mom and my dad would rent the payloaders and crane and dump trucks and stuff like that to move stuff at our place. So this guy Hugo, he had a daughter named Marlin, and so Marlin ended up living with us, and somehow Marlin became my dad's pet. And Marlin and me, we became buddies. Oh man, I remember I had a big crush on her. But, you know, I was a little boy, man. I didn't know anything. All I know is I had a big crush on this girl. So whenever my dad would go to the big city, my dad would bring me and Marlin. And by the way, my dad nicknamed her Kitten Cat. So anyway, Kitten Cat and I would end up sleeping on the same bed. We'd watch movies together. We would roam around. Well, just when everything fell apart, everybody had to go home to their own towns and houses and their own family. And Kitten Cat did the same thing, and for many years I lost touch with her. But back in 1984 maybe, I saw her once in a while, but she was already in college while I was still in high school. Well, Kitten Cat and I became boyfriends and girlfriends. But boy, Kitten Cat was a very mature girl, and I was so immature, man. It didn't work out. But take a guess where she is right now. She's in Port Royal, Virginia. the landscape in our property or around us are mostly volcanic rocks, big boulders, and in order for you to be able to make something or build something or clear something, you had to take care of those boulders. Boulders were as big as this truck and trailer. And they were the hard kind of boulders. And fortunately, my dad was a licensed explosive. Oh, my dad loved dynamite. Even as a little kid, I used to play around with dynamite. Even at the age of 10 or 12, I already knew about dynamites and fertilizers and diesel fuel. Because that's what my dad would use to blow up boulders. So when the Oklahoma bombing happened, and they said what kind of explosive they used, I knew right away what they were talking about. Man, I remember on the bottom of my bed was 13 cases of dynamite. Now, how many of you out there can testify sleeping with dynamites in your bed? Of course, dynamites are very, very stable. Contrary to Hollywood, you can shoot dynamite, you can put dynamite in fire, you can cook it, you can light it up. It doesn't happen. Nothing happens. If you put it on an open flame, all it does is it kind of gives a very colorful fire. Blue, green, yellow. See, dynamite, the way dynamite is exploded is it needs that impact, a certain amount of impact. Not by spark, not by anything, but just imagine a firecracker. The concussion of the firecracker, when you blow up when you lit a firecracker, it has that expansion, a certain amount of expansion and pressure, that kick, that boom. That's what ignites the dynamite. But in this case, it's called a plastic cap. Dynamite, dynamite gets unstable though when it becomes old, and when it starts to sweat and has that little residue on its wrapper, and because that becomes nitroglycerin. And that becomes very unstable. long as you keep it dry, well ventilated, cool. Right across the road from where my house is, there was this kind of a spring there, and it was a very small spring, and it had rocks all over the place. Well, just for fun, my dad blew up all the big boulders and made a swimming pool out of this spring. Oh, this spring had beautiful water. Very clean, tasty, cold. You name it, man. It was the best water you could drink. And we'd drink right out of it. And my dad made it into a swimming pool. And he even made a like a shed over the overflow from the swimming pool was made into a laundry part. And my dad put a little shed on it that way, you know, people that would wash their clothes, they would be shielded from the sun. My dad and my mom did a lot for the barrio. It was very sad when my mom and my dad separated. It didn't only affected us, but the whole barrio. Everybody was, it acted like a dominoes effect, because my mom and my dad employed half of the barrio, plus the electricity at night. Everything was turned off. And get this, we were the first one to have a TV in the other side of the island. In fact, probably at one time it was the first TV in the whole island. I remember my dad made a very tall tower for a TV antenna. Yes, it was black and white. And you had to tune it, go back, tune it again, go back and turn the antenna. My dad had this specific order that if anybody wanted to watch TV, they would have to pay a dime. The problem with that was I was in charge of the collection. And, well, I didn't have the heart to charge anybody with a dime. everybody was my buddy. So pretty much everybody watched for free. Let's see, the most popular TV show back then was Combat, The Rat Patrol. What else was there? I don't know if they had basketball back then. Probably not. Yeah, whenever my dad was showing these TV shows, though, almost the whole barrio would be empty. Everybody be out in our house watching TV. For most of them, they never knew what a TV was. Man, I had a great time growing up. I sort of lived in kind of a both worlds of my family being wealthy. I live in a very modern, wealthy house, but I played with the kids in the barrio. They were just regular people. They were, they live as natives, and so during the day I would live as I lived and played and whatever else like the natives, and then at night I would go home and I'd go home into a modern family. Oh, and I cherish that memory. And even though my mom and my dad were, they were pretty wealthy back then, they did not shelter me they were not snobs that they did not allow me and my brother to play with, the commoners. That's why my mom and my dad were so popular in the barrio. Because my mom was just a down-to-earth person. Whatever they needed in the barrio, they would run to my mom, and like a fiesta or a wedding or somebody got sick or whatever, they would always run to my house and ask my mom for help. And guess what? We were the only one in the whole island to have a welder. Welder, electricity, like a modern, shop. So everybody had, everybody would go to our house and have my dad make up something or fix something. Yes, my dad was very fluent in our dialect, Bisaya. Pick a lane, my friend. Thank you. By the way, I heard sad and horrific news today about back home in the Philippines. The last count was 13 dead, 60 wounded. And they suspect that the organizer of this bombings are the kingpin, the drug lords that specifically targeted President Duterte, Rodrigo Duterte. They targeted his hometown as a real retaliation for his war on crimes or war on drugs. Did you guys know that he has either $1 billion peso? Is it 1 billion or 2 billion bounty on his head? All the drug lords and kingpins in the Philippines, they all put their money together and they want him dead. And it's amazing because I think a week after he was elected, welcome to Pennsylvania, everybody. I think about a week after he was elected, some 60,000 drug pushers and drug addicts and crooked cops and crooked politicians, about 60,000 of them surrendered within a week. Because he vowed that if you don't give up, he was going to kill you. He ordered a cop to shoot and kill. And that's kind of that's a leadership, man. That's the kind of president that a country would need. A CNN reporter went to the Philippines and did an interview with the president and said, when is the killing going to stop? Because he was being accused of having his police officers just go out and if you don't surrender, they'll kill you. This is what he said in his inauguration speech. He told the cops, do your duty and I will protect you and I will die for you. But if you become crooked, I will kill you. And he means it. Now, how many presidents do you know in modern ages that that could say that and do it? So anyway, this American reporter from CNN or whatever, and interviewed and asked him, when is the mass killing of drug pushers and addicts and is going to stop? He said that the UN, even the UN went to the Philippines because of so-called human rights violations or issues. Oh, you should have heard what he said. He told this American reporter, "You mean to say you come here because you think that we are innocent, killing innocent people, and we shouldn't be doing this?" And said, "How about your country? How many of your people being shot dead? And how many of your human rights?" He said that the United States is one of the biggest human rights violators in the world. It's just not being broadcast. And he pointed out about Iraq and the Middle East, whole villages and slaughtered and bombed out, covered up. And this reporter came over there to, put him down. And after that, man, this reporter was so embarrassed. All he could say was, "Okay, thank you for your time." I mean, it's true, you can't clean up crime without violating some constitutional rights. You can't, not in a whole scale. You can't fix something in a whole scale and not cut corners. As much as I love democracy, there's a point where democracy becomes a weapon against itself. Democracy is sometimes to the point where it becomes a snake eating its own tail. And I think you have to you have to reset and say, you know what, we gotta start over. It's the same thing in this country. The criminals, because they tried, because they used the Constitution for their gain. One of his responses was, "Okay, how many years of the past presidents did it in a political correctness way? They accomplished absolutely nothing." This guy even says the F word sometimes on live TV. Yeah, he's not a presidential material, I tell you that. And he doesn't speak English that well. But he's a very smart guy. He was a trial lawyer for many, many years. But you would never know it by looking at him. You wouldn't think twice about his intelligence by just looking at the guy. He never wears a suit, never wears any kind of expensive jewelries or fancy shoes. He speaks his mind. Remind you of anyone? Does anybody know what that means? DOT 459? I have absolutely no clue to what that's. One of the things that it's not working out is my current hours right now on my phone, and that is not the same. So I need to do a reset. That way that this will reset. That way I could start the real time. So does that mean 4:58? Is that the available hours that I have? Is that what it means? Wow, 1 hour and 10 minutes. We'll catch you guys later. Don't worry, I'll be right back. I just got to do something here. Thanks for watching. Peace.